my mom and I would walk into hair salons or beauty salons and they'd say, well, we do your type of hair, but not yours. Or actually, you're not allowed to be in this space because of the color of your skin. I suppose that's where my passion for de-racializing hair and beauty came from.
I am an African. Africa, where it all began. The cradle of humankind. Rich in culture, diversity of resources, the silver, the gold, and its people. Legacy, passing down something of value, resources, ideas, information from one generation to another.
There cannot be any success in your lives without the willingness to live with what you regard as inconceivable.
African Legacy Project. They inspire and build.
Damaged hair, receding hairlines, burnt scalps, and long waiting periods are some of the things that women of color have to endure when it comes to hair salons. Founder and MD of Candi & Co, Candice Thurston, identified an opportunity of giving women of color a good, authentic hair care experience and started Candi & Co. Candi & Co is a beauty and hair salon that seeks to revolutionize the hair industry. After 4 years of starting the business, Candi & Co has 7 franchises and employs over 100 people. Candice shares her journey and shares her legacy. This is African Legacy Project.
My name is Candice Thurston, founder and MD of Candi & Co, a hair and beauty salon that specializes in ethnic beauty. I was born in Ladysmith, a small town in KwaZulu-Natal, and at 2 years old, my father moved to another small town called Secunda, where he worked for a company called Sasol. We weren't allowed in certain areas in this area because we were people of color, and we moved to an area called Thistle Grove. As a young girl, my parents coming from a mixed race background, my dad being mixed black, Indian and white, and my mom being mixed race and Indian, we weren't really sure in which area to actually live in. My brother once went to school and they sent him home to fetch his birth certificate because his surname was Thurston and it was an Indian primary school, to actually figure out what racial group he was. And that was kind of the entire space we lived in, growing in such a small town. And I suppose that's where my passion for de-racializing hair and beauty came from, where my mom and I would walk into hair salons or beauty salons and they'd say, well, we do your type of hair, but not yours. Or actually, you're not allowed to be in this space because of the color of your skin. My parents invested a lot of time in us being part of extramural activities. So I did acrobatics, where I got my SA colors, modern dancing, and the one sport she wanted me to be part of was gymnastics. And I remember her calling to say, listen, I've got a little girl, Candice Thurston, that's sounding English, and she wants to actually start gymnastics. And the teacher was like, sure, bring her along. We're looking at taking 4- and 5-year-olds. And when we walked into the room, this lady looked at us and said, oh, sorry, we actually don't take people of color. And weirdly enough, it never grew a bitterness in me, but it just continued to really make me strive for greatness. And really, you know, my parents brought us up not seeing gender, not seeing race, and not even seeing religion, that you look at a person and you judge them for who they are, and always bringing out the best in people. So I can sit here and say that there were so many parts of my life that I could have sat back and being like, how dare, you know, I grew up in this space, how dare people turn me away? But I always knew I had to work harder, be the best, and really pull people together to see the best in themselves. I think from all of that growing up, I had such a mixed group of friends, mixed family, and that for me right now, you know, being an adult and actually launching this business has been probably the greatest asset, that I can walk into a room and not see male or female or even titles or how much money people have, and really go in with the confidence to understand what my journey is and how I really want to change the narrative of where we come from, and not see color and not see gender or even see class, but really build a community, build a continent that is really going to show our greatness. I have an older brother, and his name is Naledi Thurston. We grew up quite close, but I think I traumatized him. No, I don't think. I know I traumatized him. I was a crybaby of note. If I never got my way, I would cry, I think probably like 8 hours of the day. At some point, I would forget why I'm crying and then remember why I was crying and continue to cry. So I think as a kid, he didn't love me much, but at the moment, he's probably my best friend. He's based in Nigeria, Lagos, and we both share such a love for the continent, and he really was a big contribution to me being the woman that I am today. In high school, I probably wasn't able to date much because he was in varsity and he had little spies in high school, so I chose to not date. And generally what happened, he'd say, girls that smoke, drink, and date are not known to be good girls. So he kind of protected me again from trying to be a good girl. But I think most of all, growing up with an older brother, he was always there to give me a man's side of view, with thinking about feminism, thinking about how a woman should handle herself, thinking about popularity. And I think right now, him being in a different country in the continent continues to give me advice within the beauty space. My mom also and dad were quite they loved bringing in other kids within the household that we would look after over a period of time. And what I loved about that is we got to learn about different cultures. And again, it drove that whole drive for me to really drive equality within our country. So I think, yeah, my brother's not just my brother, but probably my best friend. My parents, my mom is probably the introvert and my dad the extrovert. My dad grew up in a traditional household of, where he is the giver and the provider, and he worked really hard. My dad worked a 7-day week, and my mom obviously looked after her. And when my mom was probably in her 20s, she became an entrepreneur and she launched the first school in our area. And she started off a school with 10 kids and then 20, and right now it's a school that's 30 years old with 150 students. She developed the school for underprivileged kids who couldn't afford to go to school in an area that didn't have much extramural or academics. So from a parenting style, my dad was extremely strict, and he would always say to us, one day you thank me because I'm not letting you go out, or one day you'll thank me for how strict I am. And that is absolutely true. We sit here having immense respect for our parents and immense respect for how hardworking they were. And my mom, on the other hand, was the one we went to cry to when my dad was being really strict. So I think they played a good balance in both my brother and I's upbringing. Right now, I look at them and I would probably say, they are my pillars in everything that I do, and both in my career, they worked extremely hard because they came from extremely poor backgrounds. But to see how they worked as hard as they did, where they had to leave school in standard 8 and then at a later stage get their education, both of them growing up in an area where my mom looked mixed race, and she grew up in an Indian area and was called extremely derogative terms. And my dad, on the other hand, looked Indian and grew up in a mixed race society, and he was, called, really bad names. And they're just such positive people. And I think through that, looking at how hardworking they were, I sit here right now and think, shucks, if I can even achieve 30 or 40% of what they did, looking at their challenges, I'll be extremely successful. So I applied to study chartered accountancy. I loved doing accounting at high school, so I got accepted to accountancy and started at the University of Pretoria. I did that probably for 2 to 3 months, and in one class sat there and thought, I cannot see myself doing numbers for the rest of my life. I enjoy it, but not for me. Then called my brother and my folks to say, I think I want to change, I enjoy it, but I'm not too sure of my career choice. And my brother was like, why don't you go into a marketing class? Because he studied law and marketing at the University of Witwatersrand. And I was like, okay, cool, let me go check what this marketing thing's all about. And I sat in the class, and from the first class, I felt a fire light up inside me, because it was all about understanding people's needs and understanding how to develop products or experiences, and then how to market it and supply chain. And then actually called my folks and said, listen, I think I want to do this marketing thing. And they're like, what's marketing? But anyway, whatever you're going to do, as long as you're happy and you're going to be successful at whatever you do if you love what you're doing. So I kept on marketing and accounting, and I kept accounting as my second major. And yeah, that's I studied. So I basically did a BCom in marketing with a major in accounting. And I loved the fact that my parents allowed me to make a career choice. And I think I would say to anybody, don't be forced to study something because your teachers say to you, you must either become a doctor, engineer, lawyer, or accountant. Whatever you decide to do, if you put your heart and soul into it, I believe that you'd be successful of it. And I think right now I sit here thinking that was probably one of the best decisions I made at 18. At 5 years old, I imagined my life to be a certain way at 10, and that's exactly how it was. And at 10, I imagined at 13, and that's exactly how it was. And that was my kind of 3 to 5 year journeys. I'm massive on visualization. And it may not happen, or it did not happen at the exact timing, but I would say I imagined my life to be exactly where it is right now. Not maybe in the same colors or profession, but it's where I'm doing something I absolutely love and really building people. So I can't say that it would be anywhere else but here. My first job I got an internship whilst doing my honors at Wits at Unilever. It was a program called IBMC, where Unilever, as a FMCG company, traveled around different varsities to find students within the different varsities to be flown down to Durban and actually get one of the best experiences understanding the real life of working as a student. I started off as an intern at Ponds at Unilever, and basically my first job within Unilever was then moved into the deodorants category. And there I looked after brands like Shield, which is the #1 deodorants brand for men and women. It won't let you down, I still remember that. The second brand was Axe, which is all about getting the girls. So the whole thinking was about spraying on Axe and the girls would come. And till today, both those brands are so strong. Also got to work on Brute and Dove, and I specifically worked in the customer and sales category because in that space you understood distribution and sales, whereas marketing was very much about understanding the consumer, developing products for the consumer, and then taking it to market. We called it go-to-market from a marketing perspective. So lots of the mentorship I got within Unilever is to start off within the sales and customer environment to understand that part of it and then move into marketing. When I completed working in the deodorants category, I then was promoted into the brand manager position within hair. I first worked as an assistant brand manager on Shield, and then obviously moved on to brand manager of brands called Sunsilk at the time. It was probably one of the best brands to work on because it was a South African brand that was particularly developed for the market. And over that time, it passed a brand called Dark and Lovely within the mass market space. Both brands were for Caucasian as well as Afro hair, as we called it at the time. And we specifically looked at developing products for the climate of South Africa, understanding the South African women's needs. And I once did a research program that looked at almost 3,000 women and understanding what their needs were for hair. My biggest learning within Unilever was specifically within the hair category, looking at ethnic hair, was very similar to, I think, my upbringing. And it actually just took what I went through and escalated the need for education within this space. I would go into women's house and look at how they used relaxer as a chemical or straighteners as a chemical, and seeing stylists say to them, leave the relaxer until your scalp burns, or your braids need to be really tight for your braids to last longer. And the damage that I saw within that space, I mean, I saw in my family, but it just continued to happen within a Unilever space, within, in 2000s, that the miseducation of hair was still there. And speaking to women, and when you ask them what was their idea of beauty, it was to have straight hair and to be light in complexion. And I mean, that's what I grew up, where beauty was defined by blue eyes, straight hair, and lighter skin. And sitting there, it broke my heart, because you had beautiful South African women understanding beauty in a space that just, did not make sense. So I think my biggest learning from that space is that there's 100-year-old, miseducation of hair and beauty that was still happening, in the 21st century. And even though, Unilever's main space was about improving women's lives and, really changing the industry of products, They tried that, and we continue to try to deliver those products, but there was still a major shift for me that needed to happen that I don't think a global company needed to do, but it was really a consumer that needed to do it. So I moved from Unilever to MTN in 2009. I was privileged enough to be recruited to work on the 2010 World Cup. The principles of business don't really change, and the principles, I think, of marketing within that space and product development didn't change. The key change was really culture. And moving from an FMCG background to business within telecoms, that was probably the biggest challenge for me, where you had people from different skill sets, different mindsets. MTN was a younger business, but extremely successful. Unilever was a 100-year-old business with lots of processes in place. So it was, what was the positive of the other was the negative, and vice versa. I absolutely think moving from Unilever to MTN was another great transition for me. MTN didn't have the little boxes and processes that held you back from your creativity and delivering amazing work. So I think from that perspective, it was really a beautiful, proudly born South African brand where we could do proudly South African content and create South African products for our market. Some of the amazing ads we did, we pulled on Jam Alley, where we created that. We pulled on South African celebs and music to really create content for the South African consumer. So I think it's, as I said, the principles were the same, but it was really just a cultural shift and using those key principles that I spoke about with building relationships. Don't just go into a business and say, oh, well, let me take what I did in Unilever and just use it here. Almost spend some time understanding the business, understand how things work, and then going to the business, showing how you can actually improve it and deliver specific work for that specific space. Moving from corporate to entrepreneurship was a very exciting but daunting phase for me. I think the biggest scare was not having a safety net. Most people that work in corporate, I think you understand, or just having a job, you get your salary at a certain time of the month. You almost have this small barrier to make mistakes, and you're not stressing at the end of the month to pay salaries. So it really is a safety net when you're working within that environment. So I think moving into entrepreneurship space, you're like, shucks, am I going to be able to, do this? Am I going to be able to deliver? Am I going to be able to be successful? What am I leaving behind coming from 10 years of experience in corporate? Should I have stayed there to become MD? So there's a lot of questions that you ask yourself on whether you're moving into the right space. I think the three things that kept me going was one, making sure that I was able to pay myself a salary, because I always say if you can't pay the bills or buy yourself a cup of coffee, you're not going to be able to focus on your job. I did take a more than a 50% salary cut, but I needed to ensure that that sort of investment was within the capital put into the business. The second thing was being able to have enough capital to run the business. And the third part was that I needed to be there 300%. I remember I toyed with the idea of staying in MTN and then starting this business. And my partners were like, obviously coming with lots of experience. If you're not in this, 1,000%, there's no ways that this business would work. So I think those three things were the key areas that helped me transition into the entrepreneurship space, and also partnering with people that were in the industry for 8 years almost gave me that guidance and mentorship that kind of took away lots of the things that scared me moving into that space. But overall, it was an exciting transition, and I was very, very excited to take something on because I knew I was changing an industry. I wasn't going into entrepreneurship for money. I wasn't going into entrepreneurship to buy the next fanciest car or big house. I really went into it because I said I wanted to revolutionize the market. And to revolutionize the market, I needed to sacrifice a lot of what I was getting in corporate to really drive the business within Candi & Co. The second thing for me is, being quite the entrepreneur. Working in corporate, I always chatted to women and men, and they all wanted to go into entrepreneurship, but it's such a daunting experience because most of us weren't born into entrepreneur families. So, franchising is almost the best way to go into your first business because you have people holding your hands all the way. And again, driving the change of the industry, I wanted to give women the chance to run their own businesses, the chance to to run their own beauty salons, and that's why Candi & Co is a franchising model. At the moment, we have 7 women that run all 7 of our stores, doing a fantastic job of it, and it's really amazing seeing some of them move from corporate into running a business, some of them running other businesses, moving into Candi & Co. So I think the entire model of, creating entrepreneurship for women, creating job employment in an industry that, it needs formalizing, and thirdly, having all of that come together, really changing the mindset of women that are sitting in that chair to love who they are. And I say, Candi & Co doesn't sell hair, we sell confidence. When you leave the salon, you must feel like you can take on the world. I think the number one thing within my career is hard work and absolute passion, making no excuses, so no matter what the challenge is, cry it out, get over it, and move on. I also think I'm amazing at building networks and really understanding people, their backgrounds, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, and really removing arrogance. I think if you're working in an environment where you're political, and arrogance sometimes it works against you. And I know lots of people have been successful in driving that agenda, but with me it would be being true to myself and actually never doing something that I don't want to do, and I'm not it doesn't feel true to my soul. Yes, you might be given activities and elements you don't enjoy doing, but at the end of the day, try to understand every single part of the business, no matter how easy or difficult it is. Candi & Co, I remember starting off and doing events where I was pulling up banners and literally setting up the event, which was very different to coming from a corporate background where agencies did that. So I think another key part is just being extremely humble, and don't be scared to sweep the floor, make a cup of tea, and then being able to go into a boardroom and present a really good business plan. So I think being humble, being passionate, and being hardworking were probably the top 3 things that will continue to drive my space. In 2017, globally, I think we don't have a lot of hair salons that look to the needs of women of color, because it's almost something that women are not demanding. I think for such a long time, we've accepted poor service, we've accepted what women can give to us, that we're not putting pressure on salons to say we're not going to support you if we don't have the proper service, a better experience. I'm going to stop you from pulling my hair because it doesn't feel good. Again, it's an element of tradition where we've just accepted what we've gotten. And I remember clearly, before I even came up with the idea of Candi & Co, it was kind of in my head. I spoke to so many of my friends and I asked myself, and the number one thing was but Candice, what do we have to compare to? And I remembered, last year I've traveled through Paris, and I was in, New York, Brooklyn, and even in those countries, it's so difficult to find salons that specialize in highly textured hair and specialize in different curl textures. Again, it's because women are not demanding it. And I think it's time for us to put the pressure back as consumers. And that's why the naturals hair category is growing so fast, because women sat there and said, we are tired of using chemical relaxers. We are tired of stylists, putting the wrong products on our hair, telling us we can't style your hair until I put a chemical treatment on. So they started to develop their own products in their kitchens, and you've had products like, Miss Jessie's, and now some local products like Native Child and The Perfect Hair that are being developed to understand how to look after highly textured hair. So for the first time now, I think you are seeing more salons opening up, not fast enough, and that's why Candi & Co is a franchise model, so that when you revolutionize a market, you're doing it on scalability. So I think women and consumers just need to continue to put pressure on the industry so that we get it to the place that we want it to. It's like, going to eat at a restaurant. You're not going to eat at a restaurant that doesn't necessarily have the hygiene factors, or, the chef doesn't know what he's doing. You're going to demand a better experience. So for your hair, for your beauty, demand the same. Your hair demands the respect of any certain thing that you're doing within that space. So I think the main thing is just for us to drive the agenda, not only as consumers, but people that are developing product, people that are opening salons, as well as stylists that now have access to YouTube, have access to so much free content to really understand how to look after and give women the best hair care that they can. The idea of Candi & Co. lived in my head, I think, for a very long time. I always knew I wanted to go into the hair space, but I wasn't sure on which space I would go into. And I think that really was entrenched when I was at Unilever. Then moving into MTN, I kind of forgot about it. But I was still very informed about what was going on in the beauty industry, what was happening in the hair space. And I believe that there was still a major change it needed to have, or needed to happen, whether it be in the product space or in the service industry. At the same time, I became a guest of Sorbet, which is a nail and beauty space, and I loved the experience that I got in the salon. So it was always welcoming, the service was amazing, I had a loyalty form. If I wasn't happy with the service, I didn't need to pay, and I really became a loyal guest. And I was visiting Durban for a meeting for MTN, and I needed to do my nails, and I was like, I'm only going to go into Sorbet. I got into the website. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's this thing called franchising. Let me go and read up on it. And at the time, I was at MTN. I still loved doing my job, but I knew that I never wanted to stay in corporate forever. So I looked into this, and I'm like, okay, I can, let me apply. And I then got invited to the franchise meeting. On that specific meeting, Ian Furr, who was the founder of Sorbet, actually presented, and he didn't normally present it. His partner, Rudy, was traveling, and his son, Brent, was in this meeting. And from the beginning to end, even though Sorbet, was a small business in comparison to the global businesses I worked with, like Unilever and MTN, it sounded like a global business. It spoke about brand. It spoke about people before profits. It spoke about the consumer. It spoke about the experience. And I sat there and I actually got butterflies in my stomach because I was like, this is what we need within the hair industry for women of color. I'm like, how has nobody done this? I'm like, it's right in front of me. How am I going to make this come to life? And afterwards, I then went for supper with my husband. I was like, I have to, email Ian and say, I've got this idea. I want to present him. And he was like, sure, do it. And I was like, don't you think it's like, reaching too far? I mean, this guy's launched this company that's doing so well. He's like, do it. I then went home and I drafted the email to say, hi, Ian, this is my background. I have an idea that I'd like to pitch to you. And with less than 48 hours, he replied. He's like, hey, Candice, I've gone through your franchise application. You've worked at Unilever and MTN. I'd love to hear what your idea is. And this was, I think, September, October, and the next year, in January, I then put, the experience of Unilever and MTN together, put a very tight business plan together on understanding what the industry was and what it needed. I then presented it to him and his partner, Rudy, and straight after the meeting, they were like, where do we sign? We want to go into this. We have no idea on what this industry is about. We need you. We're as passionate about, just South Africa and changing the landscape. They were disrupting the beauty industry. We need this disruption, and we want to partner with you to do it. And at the heart of it, I was like, yes, let's do it. And I was then like, do I stay at MTN and then launch Candi & Co? And they were like, we are not doing this if you are not running it and you're not doing it 300%. And I was like, where do I sign as well? As I said, there was lots of things to have to get through, but I knew that this is where I wanted to be. It took us 8 months to put the plan together. I didn't just want to get back to corporate and say, hey, I'm resigning and leaving. A lot of planning went into it. A lot of research and understanding the consumer went into it. And yeah, in October, I then left MTN and we launched Candi & Co. And the next year in Feb, we then launched our first pilot store for Candi & Co. in Randburg, and that's how it all began. most common question I get asked is how did the name come about? And the most, I think, obvious answer would be, oh, my name's Candice, therefore the name was Candi. Surprisingly enough, I fought the name for a very long time. But I think how we workshopped the name is that we wanted a name that didn't talk to color or skin color. Because if you look at the industry, it's either brown or gold, it's either ethnic or Nubian or, something that kind of talks to the colors. So I was like, no, let's take color out of it. This is going to be a brand that de-racialized. So let's make it fun, let's make it pretty, let's make it bright. So we really wanted something of a candy shop, and that was kind of the concept board that we had. And we probably have about 100 names, and we always came back to the name Candi with an I. And I was like, no guys, like we can't call it Candi, it's gonna be so vain, it's named after me. At some point Ian was like, get over yourself. We love the name Candi. And I was like, well, let's add Candi & Co. It has a beautiful ring to it. A name must never really say this is what the business is. And we tested it and people just love it and continue to love it. So that's really how the name was born, Candi & Co. When we started at Candi & Co., the key contributor to driving our menu was really understanding how we build healthy hair and how we really drive women understanding how to look after their hair. So we looked at treatments, so that's, the difference between protein and moisture that your hair needs. And we really drove the understanding working with lots of natural hair bloggers, lots of stylists that were starting to play in the natural space on how to style natural hair, what products to use. I understood it, but I really needed to get into the minds of what the natural movement was all about. So our menu was very much about treatments, blow waving, finding straightening treatments that weren't chemically driven. We obviously kept relaxers on, cutting, coloring. And then the nails business is a massive industry at the moment. And we added lots of the nail services on, quite similar to Sorbet. And that was the menu that we had when we launched Candi & Co. What you'll also find is that you think you know everything. And I was like, we can't do braids because, braids damages your hair. And we've seen too much hairline damage. And the more and more research I went into, it's like, actually, let's spend time understanding how to do braids, how to twist braids that's not going to damage the hair. So we spent a lot of time in our training school with our stylists coming up with techniques on how to train stylists to plait that's not going to pull the hair, not going to put too much pressure on the hairline. And we cracked it, and then we added braids and cornrows and Havana braids onto our menu, which is now our second biggest service on the menu. So again, I think we didn't just go with, oh, we can't do it because, that's what's been happening. It's, in the past, that's how people have been doing. We sat together and we said, it's a beautiful style, it's a proudly African style. There's so much fun that you can have with braids. Let's find a way to do it. So braids are a massive part of it. And I would say the next big thing is hair growth programs. So that's the number one damage we see within Candi & Co, where women have damaged their hair because of too much, we call it traction alopecia or chemical treatment damage, and we then take them through a journey of using products and treatments to really grow back their hairline. I call myself a gardener. I'm obsessed with hairlines. I'll walk into the salon and see girls plaiting, and I look over, and if it looks too tight, I'll say, open that. So we're also changing the mindset of stylists on how to do lots of these treatments. So I think when you come into Candi & Co, we call it a one-stop shop. It is not a spa. You're not coming there to spend 4 or 5 hours. It's for the woman that's on the go. You want to come in, you're getting your hair done, you're getting your mani done, you're getting your pedi done all at one time with a glass of champagne and some Wi-Fi on the side to get your work done. We recently have started to include eyebrows, so we're doing brow threading. The brow industry is growing, as well as lashes. So it's really going to become that one-stop shop for women to look after all their beauty needs at the moment. So I love it. I call myself a Candi & Co guest, and I have my friends asking, do you pay? I'm like, of course I pay. The number one way to close down your business is let your family and friends do it for free, or take advantage of the system. So it's really important that we understand what those services are, and we continue to innovate. I'm constantly now working with understanding how to develop wigging. So again, in the beginning, women were like, I'm not going to wear a wig. That's what my granny did. And it's like, no, let's understand what wigging looks like. So almost, we've converted lots of the girls that were sewing in weaves to actually create wigs. Why? One, you're not going to spend 4 hours on the second round of doing your hair. If you buy a good quality wig or hair piece, it's going to last longer. So we personalize wigs at the moment. And I can say Candi & Co has definitely driven that growth space space within the wigging or personalized wigging space, as well as natural hair. We launched our own hair extension range because I didn't want to buy hair from suppliers where I didn't know where the hair was coming from. I didn't understand the quality. It's the other industry where women are getting robbed all the time for spending large amounts of money on hair that's not the correct quality. We're looking for innovative ways to understand lace wigs and silk wigs. Kendall Jenner's driving the wigging industry. So it's not also for one specific racial group. It's wigging is for everybody. So how do we continue to drive that space of girls also going through transitioning of natural hair? It's like, listen, just wig it. Learn how to use your shampoo and conditioners, and really taking them through that space. So I think Candi & Co is the full range of hair, but with the side services of nails, brows, and lashes. So it's the space you want to love the way I think you would love Woolies as your favorite grocery brand, Candi & Co to be your favorite beauty. One of the biggest drivers of Candi & Co for me was really driving employment. I knew that with Candi & Co, the epicenter of changing the industry was the South African stylists. And I don't think anybody sits there and says, oh, I just want to become a stylist and I'm just going to do whatever I want to. If you go back in time, the reason why stylists had to just teach themselves is because there were no hair schools that actually taught how to look after ethnic hair. So what happened is, through desperation, women were doing each other's hair, and some women and men were better than the others. So that's how the techniques actually were developed. So I knew, looking at actually changing and driving education, we needed to launch a training academy where we could take stylists of South Africa and really upskill them in the correct way of doing things. In South Africa, lots of stylists feel like, they're not appreciated. It's not the job, it's a secondary job that you want to go into. I wanted to study to become an accountant or a nurse, but I didn't have the funds to, so I just became a stylist. We want to make stylists feel that they're as important. They have such an amazing skill. They change women's lives when they sit on that seat. They are the psychologists, they are the psychiatrists, they are everything to you when you sit on that day. They're your local E-News, understanding what gossip's happening around. So when women want to get out of their households or their space, they come to their hairdresser because they know they're going to leave feeling so beautiful. So the biggest thing for us was really understanding how we're going to drive employment in an industry that is so big. So at the moment, Candi & Co, with every Candi & Co store we open, we employ between 13 to 15 people. We're currently almost employing 100 stylists and nail techs and FDC. So we continue to drive that. And we know that in South Africa, SMEs are going to be the greatest contributor to job employment. So that's probably one of the biggest parts of what I love about Candi & Co is that we're going to continue to drive the employment cycle, paying stylists on time. We have a training school and we continue to train for free. Stylists come into Candi & Co without having to invest in their own equipment or their own product. They come in and all they need to do is really give their heart and soul and passion to amazing experiences and really good hair experience for their consumers. So looking at the landlord experience within a brand, I think the key thing is not so much about whether the brand is a brand for women of color or not. It's about putting a very good business plan together, making sure that you have a brand. We spent quite a lot of investment just designing the logo. Understanding the colors, understanding the CI. And I think that's obviously from my background with the Unilever at MTN, but you're basically taking, a skeleton of a person and you're now saying, let me put, the look of it, the makeup and the clothing. And that's what we developed for the brand. So if you're going to go to a landlord, it wasn't about who's the brand for, who's the target market. It was about show us the brand, show us what the store is going to look like. What is it going to offer? Is there going to be a menu? What are the financials of the business? So the key thing was really showcasing that to the landlords that we went to. I think a big advantage obviously was that Candi & Co was part of the Sorbet group, so that obviously opened up quite a few doors for us because they understood that it had a backing of a very well-known franchise business. But at the heart of it, I know other businesses that cater to women of color because they understand the market and they've put so much investment in building a beautiful brand. They have not had issues with landlords. I think the key thing and my advantage was that I really didn't understand how to sign a lease agreement or how to build a store, and that was my big contributing factor to wanting to partner with Sorbet, in that I didn't want to own one salon. I wanted to own or create salons or for various areas, so that we're building the model to really revolutionize the industry. And to do that, we needed to do it via a franchising model. So we're creating entrepreneurship opportunities for other women. And partnering with Sorbet has made me launch 7 stores in less than 3 years, compared to, I think, doing it on my own, making much more mistakes and probably only opening half of the stores at the time. So I think understanding that partnership and understanding, take your business seriously, put lots of work behind it. You should not have problems with landlords, and then get experienced people, even if it's not your partner, get experienced people to help you read your lease agreements, help you negotiate, so that you really get into something that'll work for you. So Candi & Co is a franchising model, and it's really about developing more stores within the country, the continent, and then taking it globally. We want to focus at the moment on really growing the brand within South Africa. The second area of growth is really understanding the product elements and what's needed in the space, specifically the hair extension space. And I would say the third area of growth is looking at the online industry. If we look at global trends, the bricks and mortar system is something that's slowly, moving into a different direction. So it's really understanding what the business model would be between our current salons and an online environment. The best piece of advice I got was probably from my husband and my family, where they said, sky's the limit. No matter what you put your mind to, if you put your heart and soul into it, it would happen. You might cry, you might have difficult days, you might want to give up, but just as you're about to give up, it's probably going to happen. So I think that's probably the biggest piece of advice: never give up. It's big cliche, and I think people hear it and they often would say, but they're just lucky. I don't believe in luck, to be honest. I believe in visualization. I believe in hard work. I believe in putting yourself out there. I believe in telling people what you want from life, what you want to achieve with your business. And it won't happen in your time. It might not happen the way you want it, but if you continue to push and push and push, it'll happen. My definition of success is having people say to you that you've changed their lives. And I think within Candi & Co, within MTN, within Unilever, I often have people that have worked in my team that I've mentored that said, Candi, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. I often hear your voice when I'm presenting. I'm putting a presentation together and I'm thinking of you, or I'm sometimes having a tough time and I think about a story you told me. So I can't sit here and say I don't like nice things. Of course, success is sometimes a material element, but I think material things will only make you feel successful for a short period of time. But actually seeing your mentors and the success of other people, the success of the stylist for me, the success of just somebody you spent an hour, 2 hours with, that is my definition of success. So it's not so much about me leaving a legacy, but knowing that I've left a mark positively on people to really find what their greatness is, find what their lane is, and striving for it and being successful in their own way. What makes me happy is seeing other people happy. I love being in a room of people that are smiling and we can laugh and have fun, and that really kind of awakens a spirit in me. And I think that happiness is often built with spending time with close family and friends, but I also love meeting new people. I love hearing people's stories. I love ideas. I love creating ideas or taking people's ideas and helping them take this idea, which is a seed, and then it kind of flourishes into a beautiful flower. My husband often says to me, your brain never stops. It's just like ideas that are going on and on and on, and I love that idea of creativity and ideas. So I think happiness is all about being completely stimulated in my brain, through my work, through people, but most of all, just seeing people happy. So I think the reverse of that is, what breaks my heart is seeing people that are unhappy, or, the idea of poverty. And even though Candi & Co is about beauty, people always laugh at me. They're like, what's your number one thing to do in the world? And I say, eradicate poverty. And they look at me like I'm crazy. And I don't think it's crazy. And I think through job employment and through lots of people standing together, it's something that we can really, aim to achieve within the continent. And I completely believe that we live in when I say richest, not just by the raw materials of our continent, but by culture, by people, by forgiveness, and Africa is the continent of the future, and I want to be a part of that. And that's what makes me happy, understanding that that's the vision of me and many other young leaders, many other entrepreneurs, and that happiness is driven through that kind of vision for the continent. My legacy as Candice Thurston would be to have developed a proudly South African brand, or proudly African brand, that has been able to go across the globe and change the mindset of what beauty is for women of color. Having us sit there and not continue to look at ourselves in the mirror and be, are we good enough? Is our hair good enough? Are we pretty enough? And really understand that when we, look at ourselves, and no matter what we do, that we are equals. I think the other key thing is being able to really be a brand that is mentioned, that really drove employment within the continent, and really was able to build many entrepreneurs within the continent. Because with those two things, I truly believe that we can change people's lives, and not only build a brand that is, about beauty, but a brand that is about confidence, a brand that is about love, and a brand that's about sharing. So the legacy for me is, I suppose, really spreading the idea of equality and love, and just knowing that as a young little girl from Secunda, who grew up as a mixed race girl and was picked on, I was really, against all challenges, was able to create something that took over the world.